Alright everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is the Jordan Report. I am your host, Robert Jordan. And I have to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, and share. Alright, I want to go over a couple articles of Joe Biden, and then I'm going to show you a clip at the end of Joe Biden talking about the 1994 crime bill. I'm only pointing this out, the irony of this thing, because Joe Biden has a long history of racism. We all know this. But somehow, he's maintaining black support. Joe Biden, the only thing that's keeping him alive is black people supporting him. He's actually counting on black people to win this whole thing. With his long history of racist statements. And so I'm just going to go over a couple of these articles in a video just to point out the irony. A racist narrative. Biden warned of welfare moms driving luxury cars. The former VP was championing of welfare reform during the 80s and 90s and used language that seemed right out of the Reagan playbook. This was just published on August 29th. In the fall of 1988, shortly after Congress had passed the first piece of welfare reform legislation in 50 years, Joe Biden, then a senator from Delaware, wrote a column in his local newspaper that leaned heavily on racial stereotypes in praise of the effort. We're all too familiar with stories of welfare mothers driving luxury cars and leading lifestyles of mere rich and famous, the column read. Whether they are exaggerated or not, these stories underline a broad social concern that the welfare system is broken down, that it only parcels out welfare checks and does nothing to help the poor find productive jobs. Listen, I don't have any problem with Joe Biden and all his welfare statements. I'm just pointing this out as an irony. Okay, we should have never been on welfare in the first place, but these statements would be considered racist today by the same people who are screaming racism, racism, racism. Okay, they're going to vote for him in the next election. These are supposedly racist statements. Biden's argument, delivered in the pages of the New York Post, was not a full embrace of the rhetoric of conservatives at the time, who warned that the indigent, in their estimations mainly African Americans, were using government assistance to supplement lavish lifestyles. But it certainly echoed it and added to the perception that the problem wasn't poverty itself, but poor people abusing poverty-fighting programs. The thing that strikes me about the Biden quote is him acknowledging that it might not be true, but then saying that doesn't matter because perception becomes reality. The people's attitude needs to be listened to and respected rather than corrected, said Josh Levin, who wrote the book titled The Queen, that traced the roots of the stereotype. Levin added that Biden's line struck him as atypical of Democrats at the time. 30 years later, as Biden finds himself the front runner for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, both the column and Biden's broader support for welfare reform could prove politically problematic. Obviously not, because black people are the ones who's keeping him afloat politically. It's the black vote that's keeping him in this whole thing. So somehow he's been scrubbed clean of his whole past, and they're just going right on and supporting it. Serving as another resume spot, along with his prior praise for segregation of senators and his opposition to busing, that raises concern about past cultural and racial sensitivities. It certainly was a racist narrative. Adrienne Strawfire, executive director of Black PAC, an affiliated nonpartisan Black Progressive Action Coalition, said of Biden's use of the welfare recipient with the luxury car imagery. That was obviously the sort of outrageous and untrue stereotype that emerged certainly during the era of Ronald Reagan. This notion of fraudulent, undeserving women. I was a kid, and I remember that being an image that as a child I knew was inaccurate. Noting that Biden had claimed this column not to know if the stories were true, Strawfire added that didn't actually matter. The challenge, she said, is when you lead that imagery, it actually negates in some ways what comes after that. Again, people, that all this will not stop the black Democrats from voting for Democrats. I don't care how racist they are. We can only imagine what would happen to Trump if he said stuff like this. Okay, now we're going to move on to this one too, and I'm going to finish up and I'm going to show you a clip after this, okay? But this is 1976. This is the same era. Biden in 1976. Criminal justice system should punish, not rehabilitate. Biden and his people did more to destroy the black family than almost anybody else. He put more black men in prison than anybody in the country. All his crime bills that was supported by the Congressional Black Caucus, I might add. Former Vice President Joe Biden said in 1976 that the criminal justice system is intended to punish, not rehabilitate criminals. The Democrat presidential candidate also argued against more federal funding for rehabilitation programs, according to comments uncovered by the Washington Examiner. Biden's remark came during an address at the annual Jefferson Jackson dinner in Boise, Iowa in 1976. We liberals, that's the liberals, and we liberals stand up and we say we need to do is rehabilitate. And yet we go to any university in the United States of America and we find among the academics a recognition of the fact that we don't know how to really rehabilitate, Biden said. We have not found a way to rehabilitate. And yet we conduct a debate and tell ourselves that if we only had more money, we correct the system. That is not true. Flat out not true. Why should we liberals, why should we Democrats apologize for saying the criminal justice system has implicit in it the idea that a crime should be met with punishment? What is wrong with that? I don't know. I don't have any idea. Biden continued. If you commit a crime, you should be accountable for it. And you don't have to be some racist so-called redneck to say that. Listen, I agree with Biden, but the point I'm trying to make is the black Democrats who support him now would consider that a racist statement. So I'm just pointing out the irony. That's why I'm showing you this. And next I'm going to show you a video talking about the crime bill. Biden claimed Democrats' focus on rehabilitation will lead Americans to turn to figures like then Alabama Governor George Wallace. I'm going to leave the link to both of these articles. You guys should both read them. They're very, very interesting. Okay, now here's the clip of Joe Biden talking about the crime bill. Now listen to this. I just want everybody to hear this. Now you tell me that these people would not consider this racist today.
About that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society.
Okay? You guys hear that?
We have...
That is Joe Biden talking. And in today's world, that would be an extremely racist statement. Even in today's world. Okay? But black Democrats will be voting for him in the next election. They know all this about him. They know all this. Could you imagine if Trump had said all these things? Just think about that.